It's an argument as old as time itself. Which is better? Star Wars or Star Trek?
Okay, let's be honest. That's a question that can never really be answered. They've both got their ups and they've both got their downs. And someone who likes Star Wars might not like Star Trek, and vice versa. But there's also people who like both, so it's a question you can never really truly answer. Besides, they both cater to different things. Star Wars is primarily a movie franchise. The main bulk of the story, the main story, that is told in the movies, whilst Star Trek has primarily been a TV series since its inception. Sure, it has movies, and you can, for the most part, ignore those movies, if you want. And there are certainly a couple of those movies that should be ignored. It also might come as a bit of a surprise that, despite the fact that these two franchises are often seen to be almost at war with one another, very rarely do they outright battle. Sometimes they can have close battles. For example, 1977, you had Star Wars A New Hope come out. 2 years later, the first Star Trek movie, motion picture, came out. And, well, that was a battle that Star Wars definitively won. But that was a battle separated by 2 years. And even with the next Star Trek movie, The Wrath of Khan, that was only a year before Return of the Jedi. Either way, though, when the two do come to blows, or as close as you can, Star Wars is usually the one that comes out on top. And, you know, I get that. Star Wars is an incredibly popular series. Huge amount of world building has gone into it these past, it's almost 50 years now. Jeez. It is a franchise that is loved the world over. So is Star Trek. But I think 9 times out of 10, if you were to ask someone on the street which they preferred, they're gonna say Star Wars. Despite this, I believe that this year, 2023, we saw the first time that Star Trek has definitively wiped the floor with Star Wars. In literally a dueling series. The duel of the shows. 2 series from each franchise going toe to toe in the same release schedule, more or less. And that was the battle between Star Trek Picard Season 3 and The Mandalorian Season 3. It's a near reversal of fortunes for the 2 series. First, you had, in late 2019, The Mandalorian Season 1, which was, need I say it, incredible. Such incredible television. What we needed to see from Star Wars. And then the following year, in late 2020, we had Season 2, which was one of the best TV series ever, if you ask me. The Mandalorian Season 2, just fan-bloody-tastic. Meanwhile, Picard Season 1 couldn't hope to match Mandalorian Season 1. And Picard Season 2 was, well, it was a pile of shit. In fact, Picard Season 2 was having more of a direct fight with the Book of Boba Fett than it was with Mandalorian, and it was still not as good as Book of Boba Fett, which is saying something, because even Book of Boba Fett wasn't great. It could have been better. And we're gonna get onto that. So we had Mandalorian Season 1. The season that sees Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, finding Baby Yoda, who later we come to know as Grogu. Finds Baby Yoda, decides, I don't want to give this kid up to the Empire, so I'm going to just steal him away and try to live my life whilst being chased by bounty hunters and the Empire and whatever. And eventually comes back to Navarro, I think it is, because I can't remember the exact reasons. It's been a while since I watched Season 1, if I'm honest. But he comes back, and his new creed, his new objective at the end of Season 1 is to find a Jedi. Return Grogu to his kind, if not his own species, to the Jedi. And that's what Season 2 is about. Finding the Jedi. And it started off with this incredible battle against the Krayt Dragon. Episode 2 was a bit of more filler, but still sort of moved the story on a little bit. Episode 3 brought back Bo-Katan. Episode 4 sort of laying the groundworks for perhaps the sort of Palpatine things that shouldn't have happened in Episode 9. And then the next episode, Chapter 5, actually Chapter 13, The Jedi, brought back Ahsoka Tano in live action. And then Episode 6 of Season 2 brings back Boba Fett with Tamora Morrison. And of course, it all culminates in Chapter 16, The Rescue, and the return of Luke Skywalker. Full with the return in CG, more like. But still, what an ending to that series. And one of the highest rated TV finales ever. Of course, Season 2 ends with the establishment that Grogu, Baby Yoda, has finally gone to the Jedi. He's taken away by Luke Skywalker at the end of Season 2, and at that point it was believed that we might never see Grogu again. Of course, we would have loved to see him again, but you never know, we might never have seen him again. And then here's the really tricky part, the irritating part, because it then assumes that you're going to watch the Book of Boba Fett. And that's a problem if you didn't. Someone I know decided to not watch the Book of Boba Fett and instead waited for Season 3 of The Mandalorian, which sounds fine, right? So the Season 3 of Mandalorian starts off with a sort of previously on The Mandalorian sort of thing, like you often see, and it tells you that Grogu went back with Luke Skywalker. He is now with the Jedi, I think. Regardless, the last you saw of Grogu, he was being taken away by Luke Skywalker, and then you wait 3 years, well, 2.5 bit years, for Season 3 of Mandalorian, and what's one of the first things you see? Grogu in Din Djarin's arms. Sorry, I thought he was taken away by Luke Skywalker. How's he back with Din Djarin all of a sudden? That's pretty much verbatim what this friend of mine said to me. He was so confused. How on earth did Grogu end up back with Din Djarin? Turns out, you had to watch the Book of Boba Fett, which is another issue because the best episodes of the Book of Boba Fett were the ones that that Boba Fett hardly appeared in. Ugh. So Mandalorian Season 3. First episode starts airing 2 weeks after Star Trek Picard began. Season 3, that is. And the first 3-4 episodes aired alongside fellow Star Wars TV show, the animated show, The Bad Batch. And I don't remember which episode it was. I think it was episode 3, where you're focusing on Dr. Pershing, or whatever his name is. And the Bad Batch had aired. I'd watched the Bad Batch first, and then watched the Mandalorian, expecting it to be good, and then after that episode ended, I honestly thought to myself, I think I preferred the Bad Batch episode. The Bad Batch had a better episode than the Mandalorian, which I thought maybe was just a fluke. Surely that's just a fluke. Sometimes you get filler episodes that aren't as great. I mean, Season 1, its worst episode was Episode 6, Chapter 6, with Miggs Mayfield, where they're all on the prison ship. But it was still a decent episode. Season 2's worst episode was a toss-up between Episode 2 and Episode 4. Chapters 9 and Chapter 12. It's up to you which you think it's the worst of those. Mando Season 3 didn't really start moving, really, until the 7th episode, I think. It was a mess of a season. I look back on it, and it just feels like there was no narrative direction of where to go. Where on earth do you want this to go? It was all over the place, and the 6th episode of Mando Season 3 was unmitigated filler that served zero purpose towards the plot. It doesn't help that the first 2 episodes of Season 3 happened in an entirely different season, episode, series. They happened in the Book of Boba Fett. This is Season 2.5. And that's where we find that Grogu decided not to be with Luke Skywalker and the Jedi anymore. He wanted to go back to Din Djarin. So he did. And the recap at the start of Season 3, Episode 1 doesn't even cover that. It doesn't tell you that Grogu came back from the Jedi, he's with Din again. You're just expected to have watched Book of Boba Fett, which was a pretty crap show. Meanwhile, on the other hand for Star Trek, Picard, that is, because there was Strange New Worlds that aired in the middle of 2022, and the middle of 2023 as well. We'll get on to Strange New Worlds Season 2 later. But with Picard Season 3 rather, that was to Star Trek that Picard Season 3 was to Star Trek that Mando Season 2 was to Star Wars. A triumphant return for beloved characters, both as people and both ships as well. In Mando Season 2, we saw the return of the Slave One, Boba Fett's ship. We also, I kind of will count this, in Book of Boba Fett, we also had the return of the Naboo N1 Starfighter, my favourite Star Wars starfighter. And in Season 3 of Picard, we got the return of the USS Enterprise D, which is, I have a model of it sitting right behind me. That's how legendary that ship is. As legendary, if not more so, than the original Enterprise, which is sitting right next to it, I might add. The Enterprise D is a character in of itself. Its destruction over Viridian 3 was so contrived, it had to come back. And it got the send-off it deserved. We also got some cameos from the the hero ships of Deep Space Nine, to fight the Defiant, and Voyager as well as the NX-01 Enterprise from Enterprise, the one with Captain Archer and Scott Bakula and all that. Just small little cameos, but still returns for some legendary ships, returns for legendary characters. Some people didn't like the series still. I mean, sure, there's always going to be some people who won't like it. Maybe it just didn't hit the right notes for them. I think Steve Shives found the nostalgia factor a bit too contrived. He felt that the series fell back too much on the nostalgia, which, I mean, I guess I can see it. Some people want something entirely new. And then, of course, there's people who hate the new stuff regardless. Looking at you, Nerdrotic. For me, Season 3 of Picard was incredible. It had its flaws, sure, but come the end of Episode 9, Vox, I was practically wetting myself in excitement. I was giddy. I hadn't felt that way since the end of Mando Season 2. I didn't have that at all with Mando Season 3, or with Book of Boba Fett. Mando Season 3 was such a disappointment. As I said just a couple of minutes ago, Season 1, some of those episodes, I felt were overshadowed by The Bad Batch, a children's show, sort of. The ending of Picard Season 3 has also opened the doors for potential new series. There has been a huge fan movement over the past year, most of this past year at least, for a new series, helmed by Terry Matalas. It's often called Star Trek Legacy, which is not to be confused with the video game that released in 2006. This would be completely different. It would focus on the adventures of Captain 7 of 9 of the USS Enterprise G, Raffi, Jack Crusher, cameos from the TNG crew like Riker, Troy, Worf, Picard, of course. And, of course, Beverly Crusher. I said Crusher once, I forgot about the other Crusher. The Elder Crusher. Hell, maybe we might even see Will Wheaton come back at some point. That would be pretty cool. And, of course, cast members from the other series, Deep Space Nine. Voyager. It would be great to see some of them around. I would love to see Star Trek Legacy, and I want it to happen, as long as Paramount thinks that it would be a good idea. And, you know, I hope they do think it's a good idea. Of course, things for the battle didn't end with Season 3 of Picard and Season 3 of Mandalorian, because you also had Season 2 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds and the first season of Ahsoka. And whilst Ahsoka certainly had its high points, brought back Grand Admiral Thrawn, I still felt even that was being overshadowed by Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which had that hilarious Episode 7, that crossover with Star Trek Lower Decks, the animated series. It was such a brilliant episode. And I think I would even declare Strange New Worlds being at least on par with Ahsoka, if not better. It wasn't incredible, sure, it wasn't Picard Season 3 levels of incredible, but it was damn good. And for Ahsoka to fall so short, it just... Something is going wrong with the Star Wars TV series. It just is. To have Star Trek beating it twice in 1 year, if you ask me, that's not forgivable. Star Wars needs to do better. I mean, sure, so does Star Trek. But it's unbelievable to me that since the end of Mando Season 2, Star Wars has not really been on the same foot since. Book of Boba Fett. As I said, best episodes of that weren't even about Boba Fett. Mando Season 3. Underwhelming. Ahsoka. Also pretty underwhelming. Better than Mando Season 3, but still not as good as Strange New Worlds Season 2. They have to do better. Mando Season 3 had so much potential and they squandered it. So now they have to try and get Season 4 much better than what they've managed here with Season 3. Hopefully Season 3 was just the one dud season, and Season 4 could be incredible again. I want to see Mandalorian being good again. And I want to see Andor Season 2. Andor was incredible as well. It's such an underrated series. We need to see that. And of course on the Star Trek side, I want to see Legacy. Now that Discovery is coming to an end, good riddance, I want to see Star Trek Legacy. Hell, I'd love to see a few more series maybe. The ending of Picard Season 3 has also opened the doors for potential new series. There has been a huge fan movement over the past year, most of this past year at least, for a new series, helmed by Terry Matalas. It's often called Star Trek Legacy, which is not to be confused with the video game that released in 2006. This would be completely different. It would focus on the adventures of Captain 7 of 9 of the USS Enterprise G, Raffi, Jack Crusher, cameos from the TNG crew like Riker, Troy, Worf, Picard, of course. And, of course, Beverly Crusher. I said Crusher once, I forgot about the other Crusher. The Elder Crusher. Hell, maybe we might even see Will Wheaton come back at some point. That would be pretty cool. Suffice to say, 2023 has been a very good year for Star Trek, and a very embarrassing one for Star Wars TV shows. The worst year in Star Wars since 2019 and The Rise of Skywalker. If you ignored Mandalorian Season 1. Mandalorian Season 1 made up for the failure of Rise of Skywalker. But they don't have any movies to fall back on. This is it now. Star Wars has to start performing again. It's time to buck your ideas up, Dave Filoni and Happy. I can't even remember his name. That's embarrassing. Jon Favreau, that's it. It's time to buck your ideas up, mates. Start doing some good. Until next time, guys, thank you for watching, and good night.